it's Julie here. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 4, and we're going to be using some interesting products today as we journal some sermon notes. We're going to be using Liquitex Basics iridescent medium and some basic acrylic paint, some heavy body white acrylic paint. So let's get started. I've got it on fast forward here, and I want to protect my surface. I'm using an unprepped page here because I'm not doing any stamping or anything like that, and acrylics don't go through. So I'm using this iridescent medium to mix with the acrylic paint, and this will give it a shimmery effect because I am doing a breathe theme for this page. So I'm mixing this light blue with the shimmery iridescent medium to give it kind of a shimmery effect because we're focusing on the breath of God. And the title of this page is going to be Breathe on Me, the breath of life. And we're looking at Elisha when he brought back to life the little boy of the Shunammite woman. And this is a really cool story. And our sermon this past weekend was all about the breath of God, and this particular story was something that I had not thought about, and so I really wanted to journal it. Now what I'm doing here is just doing some loopy loops around the page, and I have already, with just a pencil, kind of sketched on the page so I could see where I wanted to do it. And I am erasing the marks before I actually go in, because if I don't do that, I won't be able to erase them with the acrylics. So you can see how this paint is kind of shimmery, and I love this effect. This is my first time using this iridescent medium, and I love it. Now you could buy an acrylic paint that has a metallic effect, but then you'd have to buy that for every color that you want to use. And with this medium, you could just add a tiny little bit to whichever acrylic paint you're using, or you could just kind of give your page an all-over effect. So I'm having a very light hand. I don't want to thin the paint too much because I want a thick look, but I want a very thin layer of it. So I've got a very light hand, which means I have to re-ink my brush several times, but that's okay. You know, the more time I spend in this process, the more time I'm meditating on God's Word. So it's okay. You know, some processes take longer than others, and that's okay as long as we allow for that time. And here I am in my craft room, and I don't have anything else to do tonight. I don't watch TV, so this is what I'm doing. I'm meditating on God's Word, and I'm in the Word, and I'm just having fun in the Bible. So I wanted to darken this paint up a little bit, so I just added a little bit of a darker acrylic paint. And I am giving these loops a little bit of dimension and texture. I'm staying on the same side. You want to be consistent. It's kind of like you're giving it a shadow. So make sure whichever side you pick, if you're going to be the underside or the top side, just make sure you're consistent. So I am going over each loop with a darker shade. And you can see right here, because I've added it to already the lighter blue, so I still have that shimmer effect in this darker blue. And it gives it just some depth, some dimension, and I just love how this is looking. And all of this is to give us the impression of the breath of God. Now it could have a confetti look like we're having a party. And hey, when God breathes life into us, that's a party, right? Because He's quickened us. He gives us life. And we'll have a party forever in heaven and on the new earth. But this is just the idea, because I'm using these blues. And here I'm going in and adding a little bit of white, and to give it on the opposite side that dimension again. And I'm using a heavy body acrylic because I knew just the regular soft body acrylic would not be as dark as I needed it, as visible as I needed it. So I'm using a heavy body acrylic. This is the Liquitex. And I'm doing it on the opposite side of the dark. Okay, so this text is really cool. It's Elisha, And what he does is he actually goes into the room with the child who is dead, and he stretches his whole body out on top of the child. The text reads, "Then he went up and lay on the child, put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And as he stretched himself up on him, the flesh of the child became warm. Then he got up again and walked once back and forth in the house and went up and stretched himself upon him. The child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes." I'm highlighting this section right here just with a watercolor pencil. I just want a hint of color, and then I go over it with my aqua brush. You know, this text, it's kind of, when you hear about him stretching out upon the child, it's almost uncomfortable at first, just that image. But then we think about how intimate God is. And Elisha in the Old Testament is a type of Jesus. He gives us a picture of Jesus. What that means is that he is showing us kind of what Jesus is going to be like. And right here, it's almost like Elisha was trying to give his life and give his whole body to this boy. And that's certainly what Jesus did for us. He gave his whole life, gave his body on the cross for us. So my title here is "Breathe on Me." And I have just done a cursive print across both pages, and then I am going back over it, giving it that faux calligraphy look, and I'm now erasing the pencil lines. You want to make sure it's dry. I am using, this is actually the Project Life pen, but any of your permanent pens will do that. It'll dry pretty quickly, but if it's not a permanent, just make sure you either hit it with the heat gun or you give it time to dry before you try to erase it, or you'll smear it. So I'm using now the paint, and I'm filling in these sections, these openings, so that I continue that whole blue theme, that whole color scheme. And you can't see what I'm doing off camera, but now I'm going in and just thickening up it a little bit. I'm using the white to try to give it some lighter color at the top, but I'm going to have to add some more. So I'm giving the blue darker at the bottom and the white up at the top. I needed to add some more so you can see it, so it'll be a little bit more defined. Here we go. Now you'll be able to see it. I just needed to, the paint was drying up a little bit. Now you can really tell the difference, and gives it that depth and dimension. And that's what breath is. It gives us life. It gives us depth. So I really like how this looked with that color, with the going across the page. Now I'm going to do my journaling, and I'm going to box this text out so it's a little more pronounced, and it's just, I'm highlighting that text a little bit more, pointing it out and emphasizing it, because I really want to, when I'm looking at this page, I want to be able to see what it is we're talking about. And where the paint kind of got out of the lines, I'm just going back over that. Again, I just love this text and the sermon, and it made me think about it. It took me several days before I could come back and journal it. But that's why I'm doing 2 pages here, to give myself enough room and space to do the notes. Now, there were quite a few other texts that we focused on, but this was the one that meant the most to me and the one that struck me the most. So I'm using this margin over here on the left, and that's why there's not a whole lot of color and a whole lot of stuff going on the page, although you might say it is. That's debatable. But I wanted to really focus on the journaling here and give it a lot of space. So I'm just kind of journaling what I've already talked about, and how Elisha and what he was doing is a real picture, a real image of what Jesus did for us, and how he breathed life into Adam and he gave his life on the cross. And then I always try to include a prayer. Well, not always, but most of the time I try to include a prayer on my journaling. And so I write, "Lord, breathe your life daily into and on me so I can live for you." And then I'm going to stamp, but I think I wait a little bit. But I want to make sure that I stamp sermon by. Yeah, here I am. So I pull out one of my date stampers, and this one has various phrases, and this one has sermon by. Now, one trick is when you ink it, I didn't want it to say sermon by and then the date. So as soon as I inked it, I rolled the date away so that it would just say sermon by, and I could write the name. And then on the other side, I can put the date. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little bit of splatter painting, and I was going to use the Illustrated Faith watercolors, but I had not opened up the black yet. So what I'm going to do is just take one of my watercolor pencils, and with some water, I'm just kind of drawing on my palette, and with some water, I create some watercolor paint here, and I just tap it on my pen. It is a little thick, so I go in and blot, that's the word, blot it back up. But that gives it the look that I need. I don't know why, but I seem to always need a little bit of black grounding for it. And so here I write, thank you for your spoken word, because again, this was sermon notes. Bible journaling can be notes for your devotional. It can be notes for just a verse that you've read, or a great place to journal events in your life. And if you've seen some of my videos, I might link some of them where I'm journaling things that are happening, or as in this case, sermon notes, a place where you can just journal what God has spoken to you through the sermon, the spoken word. So here's a tab that I've cut out previously, and it's just a blue cardstock. And then I write breath of life. I use one of the word fetties. And then you see the black word fetty from Illustrated Faith. And I chose, this is exactly what I needed to hear today. I've pulled out the black and white washi stickers from Illustrated Faith, and I'm just using these in various places. I choose some that say Christ lives in me, because that's his breath. When his breath is in me, then he's living in me, and when he lives in me, then his breath is in me. And that's there are so many songs and praise songs right now, wonderful praise songs about that. Just be the breath that's in me. So I pray that God can breathe on you. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. Like, subscribe, and join me next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.